This is Community Safe, a CI Proud Town Hall.
Good afternoon and welcome to the June edition of WMBD and WYZZ's Community Safe Town Hall. Today we're focusing on elder abuse and the resources available right here in Central Illinois in order to prevent it. I'm joined now by two leaders from the Center of Prevention of Abuse in Peoria. We've got Executive Director Carol Myrna as well as Associate Executive Director Joyce Durenzi. We appreciate you both for being here today on such an important topic and a conversation that sometimes gets swept under the rug for folks and one that can be difficult to have. So
Thanks
we
for
appreciate
having
you
us.
being here. Let's start first and foremost with the work of the center that you all do. It's such an important task and one that's not for the lighthearted. You really have to have some tough skin in order to see those things.
The Center for Prevention of Abuse is in its 43rd year. So we are so proud to be able to serve all of Central Illinois and beyond for services to help all people live free from violence and abuse. So our core services are domestic violence, sexual assault, prevention education, human trafficking, but of course elder abuse and abuse of adults living with disabilities. So we have a department called Adult Protective Services where elder abuse is housed, and it's such a key piece of the work that we do in one of our largest departments.
And Joyce, that was something that was also very close to your heart in your line of work.
Certainly. I worked in elder abuse, adult protective services for 20 years of my career at the center, so it is close to my heart.
The prevalence of elder abuse, what is that like?
Well, I think that it's a surprise to most people because it is so grossly underreported for lots of reasons. Right here in Central Illinois, and we cover 6 counties, we had over 800 new reports last year. Wow. Statewide, we're looking at almost 16,000, which sounds like a huge number, but for every one of those that we get, there may be 10 to 24 that we don't get.
Wow. Well, that is it's heartbreaking to hear those numbers, but we appreciate you both for all of the things that you do and sharing your perspective on that. Now, we're going to continue this conversation on Facebook and continue to go and dive into the topics at hand throughout the rest of the show. But right now, we're going to hear from a survivor of abuse. Ashley Antonini has that story and more.
A lot of our seniors think that abuse is always physical, and it's not. Abuse can be neglect issues, and it can be financial exploitation, and those are things that people don't always think about.
Holly Kaczynski, Adult Protective Services Director, says many seniors don't know they are being abused, many times because it is done by someone they are close to.
Typically, the nationwide stats are that 80% of abusers are typically family members or someone that victim knows, loves, or trusts, which is really sad.
A woman we will refer to as Judy experienced this firsthand when she realized a dispute with her children was more serious than she initially thought.
One particular time it became a little too difficult, and I could sense violence, and I really didn't want that for either one of us. And so I was suggested by my doctor that I should go to prevention, and that's what I did.
Now, 2.5 years later, Judy says she would not be where she is today without help from the organization.
They've gotten me to a point now where I think I can do pretty well, or better anyway, because it's very difficult to not be involved with your children, and that's where I need to be at this time.
For Community Safe, I'm Ashley Antonini.
Ahead on our Community Safe Town Hall, a look at financial exploitation as a way of elder abuse. We'll share the signs and preventative measures to protect your money and your loved ones.
This summer, CBS is all about heart. For the first time ever.
Oh, my God.
Comedy sensation and Hollywood superstar Kevin Hart is coming to network television.
That's a TKO.
To host
That's got to be difficult.
I think it is difficult, but you know, I think what helped for me is you know, I moved along in different roles, so I wasn't always doing direct service because then wears you down.
I'm sure.
After a while.
I'm sure. That's and day in and day out, and it's a role that's
so we do a
important.
lot with our frontline staff for
Absolutely.
self-care and
absolutely, because it's got to be a hand-in-hand type of thing for folks.
It's hard work.
Yeah. Well, Troy, in terms of the financial exploitation angle of things, how long have you been working in the realm of banking and things like that?
15 years with the credit union.
Wow, wow. So I'm sure, just like Joyce, you've seen quite the number of instances that have happened as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Wow, but some good training for people behind the scenes, and as they prepare to kind of take on something like that, and it's not just handling money. I think is an interesting component of things.
Exactly. It's just picking up on those cues.
Yeah.
And taking that extra step.
And I'm sure a lot of just observation and knowing how to read people, and across the line of work, knowing how to read people and have those engagements and stuff. I'm sure that'll be good for folks to know as well.
You're watching Community Safe, a CI Proud Town Hall.
Welcome back. Once again, we're joined by Carol Myrna as well as Joyce Dorenzi from the Center for Prevention of Abuse. And we've also got Troy Vanderschraft from SEFCU that are joining us now. And many times, you know, we were talking in the last block about, you know, the work of the Center for Prevention of Abuse. And sometimes that can just be physical, but that's not always the case, and that's when we really dive into the financial abuse and exploitation of things. And Troy, your role with SEFCU can dive a little bit more into that. What does financial abuse or exploitation look like for folks in our elderly population?
Sure. So with anything financial, there tends to be, and with elderly people, they tend to be a little trustworthy, and so, you know, when people talk about abuse, you know, initially it's the physical abuse, but there's also the psychological that maybe you don't see, and then the financial abuse. And so at the credit union, we train our staff, our frontline staff, to pick up on cues when elderly members are in, and maybe they're just not there, they're not acting themselves, to pick up on different cues and you know, try and have that conversation with those elderly members, discussing their financial means or obligations.
And this is something, I mean, this is part of a real rigorous training that you all participate in, and yearly is what you were telling us?
Correct, yes. We train our staff yearly as a refresher, or for any new staff, as some of the cues to pick up on, and then if we do believe there is a situation of financial elderly abuse, then the proper steps to take to report that, research it, and those types of things.
When it comes to, well, some of the things I think of when it comes to online dating for some of the elderly community, that may be a part of that, and money transactions, and you had mentioned, Troy, trustworthiness. Carol, I mean, what can people do in order to prevent some of that from happening? Because we hear about it so many times.
Well, I think that when people that care about, the people that love these folks, play an active and thoughtful role in their lives, they can make sure that they know what's going on. Ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask, are you safe? What is this unusual financial transaction? Just to make sure that they're on top of things.
Joyce, you had mentioned that in your line of work, you've done some partnerships with different financial entities. What does that look like in order to make sure that the two are really jointed?
Well, we really do rely on our partners in the financial institutions, and we've done a training called Be Safe, Bankers and Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. This is a huge industry. We're talking of about probably $2.6 billion a year that is lost from seniors through financial exploitation. So I think it's certainly the training that they do is crucial to have an understanding of what does it look like, how do I report, and what happens after I report. So it's very important for everyone to know that the identity of the reporter is confidential, because that factors into some underreporting or some fear of reporting. So I think that by working with SEFCU and like institutions, we really are increasing the awareness.
When you come across those flags, Troy, in your line of work, and when folks may come in with a loved one, as Joyce was pointing out, sometimes that reporting can be difficult for someone to take on because it's someone they know, someone they may love and care about. What is that dynamic like, and how can you move forward in order to prevent that?
In those situations, we try to have a one-on-one conversation with the member, and in some of those situations, the abuser may be with the member. It may be a son, a daughter, a grandson, granddaughter. Typically it's somebody that's related or a caregiver. And so in those situations we try and separate and have that one-on-one conversation with the member. And typically, like I stated earlier, the member is really trustworthy, and so it's understanding and educating with the member that this is your perception, but here's the reality, and here's what's happening, and ultimately having that conversation. And even if the member disagrees, there still are situations where we still will report that elderly abuse from our professional perspective to follow through, have the proper agency follow through on that.
So many great points that you all bring up. We're going to continue this conversation on our Facebook Live, WMBD and WYZZ. We'll be right back. People, when they think of just your local banker, there's just someone that handles my money,
right? And
they don't think about all of the different instances that you can really come across in some of that. It's really interesting to hear that. How long does that training period? You said it's every year. How long does that last?
An hour or two.
Okay.
It's just, and a lot of times it's just a web-based. Here's the cues and the criteria. Here's what we need to look for. If you see this, do this. Sure. If you see this, do that. Report it to a manager. Then the manager has steps to take. Reach out to adult protective services, sure, or that type of thing.
Sure.
And there are situations where the member will tell us, no, that's not right. My grandson needs help, or sure, this or that, and it's just educating the member, that I understand, what you're seeing. Ultimately, it's still up to the member. It's their money, and if they choose to do what they will with it, we can only go so far.
Well said from a man that understands that training. Yes.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking, too.
Well, we'll have you step out, Troy, and then if we could have Carol and Joyce kind of stand back off, but go right ahead.
Well, what he said about separating them, that's crucial.
Yeah.
Because it's a family member,
absolutely,
somebody they know, so they're not gonna admit anything in the presence of that family member, and they're gonna deny it a lot of times anyway.
It's got to be so hard, especially when you from the outside can see something is happening.
Elder abuse is not a quick fix.
Yeah.
It just takes a while.
Yeah.
And we have the benefit of once a case is open.
You're watching Community Safe, a CI Proud Town Hall.
Welcome back. Third-year medical students in Central Illinois are learning how to identify the signs of elder abuse. The Center for Prevention of Abuse teams up with the University of Illinois College of Medicine, Peoria for simulations that help them recognize signs of abuse with their patients. The students also learn how to address the issues and know which resources are best for the patient.
When you are in a patient's room and the patient appears very agitated, not making eye contact, for example, in the middle of summer wearing long sleeve shirts, because, somebody gripped them by their hand and shook them, so they have bruises. They can have signs of depression, or they might not make eye contact. So there are different signs in the communication that we can pick up. There could be frequent visits to the doctor's office.
We're back now with Carol Myrna as well as Joyce Renzi from the Center of Prevention of Abuse. So when we're talking about that and just even hearing the different indicators of what people can go through, some in our elderly population can go through, as Troy had mentioned, picking up on cues, different subtle signs, observation for loved ones. Carol, what does that mean in terms of stepping in and seeing that and knowing for what it's worth?
I think that just being aware of what's going on in your family member or your senior citizen's life is very important. Broken glasses could be something as simple as that, to ask how that happened. Welts, unexplained medical conditions. So just being able to see that, but then in a safe and confidential environment, address that. I'm worried about you. I'm worried about your safety. I'm concerned that someone's taking advantage of you. Those are very important questions to ask, but be ready to hear them and then be able to believe what they're telling you.
When it comes to the trainings at UI Comp and that kind of process, I mean, when some of these students go in, they don't really know what to expect. They don't really know what to see. So how does that translate in terms of a training process of how to prepare people for something like that?
Sure. Well, they don't know. You're right. When they go into what we call an OSCE, it's that observed structured clinical exam, and they do a host of scenarios in addition to elder abuse. And so we're looking at a lot of different things. I mean, typically we will have our actor, our senior patient, and a family member. So we want to see if they're going to pick up on some of those cues, as Troy said, or Carol, not making eye contact, maybe an obvious bruise, but certainly not every bruise on a senior indicates physical abuse. But there are a lot of nuances. I always say if something doesn't feel right to you and it raises the hair on the back of your neck, you're probably right, because you're taking in a whole host of cues. So it's raising that awareness. We know that the consequences of elder abuse on the healthcare community are huge. Seniors who are abused are 300 times more likely to die prematurely. They're 3 times more likely to be admitted to the hospital, and the dollars for that, we're talking about over $5 billion a year, the consequences of the medical cost of elder abuse.
And medical can come in the form of, in so many ways. I mean, when you think of the different types of abuse that are prevalent, that can manifest itself, I'm sure, in multiple ways. Regarding emotional abuse, so Carol, you had touched on the physical element of things. Emotional abuse is also one that may not be picked up as much. How can people tap into those signs for their loved ones in order to know what that could be?
It might be that they're withdrawn a little more than what you're used to, onset of depression. It could be that their abuser doesn't want you to talk to them alone. So you're able to see that there's a strange interaction there. So there's a number of signs. Joyce probably has a couple more for that.
Well, I'm thinking about early in my career in elder abuse, a client said to me one time about the emotional abuse, you can see my bruises, you can see my black eye, but you can't see those bruises on my heart. And that stuck with me. And I think the important thing to remember when we talk about allegations of abuse is that they never stand alone. If you're being financially exploited, you can bet you're being emotionally abused. If there were one face to what elder abuse looks like, then we would make better strides in eradicating it. But there isn't. It's hidden. You're not going to see those overt signs of emotional abuse. Just what Carol said. You know, if someone that you know and love all of a sudden seems different, they present as different to you, you don't want to just attribute that to a cognitive decline. There may be a reason. Being continually emotionally abused is like being held hostage. It's being under siege every day and every day until your self-esteem, your independence, everything just erodes away.
It all has an impact, and it becomes somewhat of a domino effect. It definitely feels like. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but we're continuing this conversation over on Facebook, so stay with us. and how many other people are impacted by that as well.
For sure.
It's enormous, and you know, your circle is not just you.
Right.
There's
right.
so many other
exactly
budding pieces to that. Wow. Wow. But that's, I mean, that's a profound quote right there.
It is. I never forgot that, and it just, I thought, what a great way to explain what emotional abuse feels like.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Everybody deserves to live in safety.
Absolutely.
With dignity.
Absolutely.
And longevity is a blessing.
That's true. Well, you brought up a very interesting point, Joyce, when it comes to, thank you, when it comes to the line, the gray area that can be, you know, declining cognitive functions, but also, you know, knowing that there's also substance to that. And I mean, how do you go about differentiating the two in terms of picking that up? I mean,
it is difficult. I mean, we normally would recommend a geriatric assessment. I mean, that's the only way you're really going to know if there is some identifiable cognitive decline. But you know, if you're emotionally abused and you're not sleeping or any of those things, you're going to react differently. If I keep you up for 3 or 4 days, you're not going to present as the same Shelby.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. It all influences one another at some point or another. We do have a couple of viewer questions that I got. So when we come back, we'll kick off with actually some financial stuff that some people were interested in hearing more about.
You're watching Community Safe, a CI Proud Town Hall.
Welcome back. We've been sitting down with Carol Myrna as well as Joyce Dorenzi from the Center for Prevention of Abuse, and we welcome back Troy Vanderstraff from SEFCU in order to answer a couple of questions that you all have been asking about elder abuse. So I want to jump right in so that we got as much time in order to address those. We got a question from a viewer about banks. Are they responsible for stepping in if they suspect financial exploitation? You had mentioned that you all do that, but what does that look like legally in that realm?
There is an obligation there that if we do suspect elderly abuse, that we do step in and that we do report it to the proper agency, research it, and take means to hopefully mitigate or stop it. So that there is an obligation there.
When we were talking in Facebook Live in our break, you had mentioned the amount of communication with other agencies, that this is not just a you all coming in, but the amount of work that goes into putting that together. Walk us through what other agencies you all work with.
Correct. So depending on the financial situation or the abuse situation, we would certainly reach out to Adult Protective Services. If we feel like there's a crime that's been committed, a theft type of situation, then we would reach out to the local law enforcement, get them involved, and then they would go through whatever means necessary for them to contact the proper agencies on their end to make sure that everybody that's involved or that needs to be involved is involved.
When it comes to, we've talked a lot about more close encounters with some of our elderly population. If you have someone that you may not live with, a senior citizen that's not under the care of your roof, that may live in a nursing home or may live somewhere outside of your realm, how would you all recommend those loved ones keep an eye on them without hovering, but making sure that they're okay and keep those those eyes on them in one way or another?
Well, I think isolation is the biggest risk factor. So let's say that you are a child of an aging parent and you live outside of the area. You know, there are care coordinators or community care programs trying to get something in place like that, another set of eyes, a neighbor, just kind of alert them. you know, to, hey, mom or dad is alone and I kind of have this concern. And again, having that conversation with mom or dad in a non-threatening manner. Seniors are very reluctant to share a lot. I think that they're going to be ashamed if they've made a bad decision. They don't want you to know that they've done that. There's a fear of being placed in a nursing home for most of our seniors. So get another set of eyes in there where you can. And again, don't be judgmental. Try to meet them in a non-threatening manner, just to talk about it so that they still feel empowered and in control of their life.
And of course we see a lot of nodding, and of course we're going to continue this conversation right after the break as well as on Facebook Live. We'll be right back. I mean, to continue, I'm going to let you continue your thought on that, but Carol, you were nodding a lot on that one too.
Yeah, I mean, everything Joyce says is correct.
Yeah, sure.
But it's, I mean, being non-judgmental is huge.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
It can be difficult.
Oh, but you're exaggerating. Oh, you're not, you know, it could be this, it could be that. I have elderly parents. I understand that.
Absolutely.
But it's important to believe what you hear and be non-judgmental.
Sure.
And I have to say, as I age and am part of this senior population, you know, I get very offended if I think that someone thinks that I'm not in control of my faculties and that I don't know what I'm doing. But I could be exploited.
Sure.
You know, everybody can.
Sure.
It's just,
a big piece.
Yeah.
It's a big component of things, that's for sure. Everyone is, no one is too good or above
all
anything.
socioeconomic lines, all cultures.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're watching Community Safe, a CI Proud Town Hall.
Welcome back. We want to once again thank Carol Myrna, Joyce Dorenzi, as well as Troy Vandeschraff for joining us to talk about this very important topic of elder abuse right here in Central Illinois. And Carol, if you can tell us how people can get more involved, the resources involved, in order to continue this conversation.
Well, the Center for Prevention of Abuse relies on a number of funding sources, but financial help is always appreciated. We're getting ready to have our signature fundraiser later this summer, the 30th annual duck race, which will happen on August 25th. So ducks are available for sponsorship between now and then, $5 a piece, and we would love it if folks would sponsor a duck in honor of a senior in their life. What an appropriate way to kick off duck season, to do it during Elder Abuse Awareness Month and do it that way. But all the money stays local. It all goes 100% to help clients, including our Adult Protective Services Department, which is where elder abuse services are housed.
And we truly appreciate all that each and every one of you are doing in order to keep our elders safe and the rest of the community safe. Of course, as always, continue to follow us on air and online. Thank you so much for joining us for this Community Safe Town Hall.